Hey guys, welcome back. Today with me we have Akshay and Sivanjali, and today we will be trying to understand the next structural design pattern, which is the bridge. Okay,
Yeah,
shall we move?
yes.
First of all, we need to understand what and where will be its application. Let's try to first understand the scenario where this can be used. We know about usual inheritance, right? We have a superclass which our subclass extends. One abstraction can have multiple implementations.
Yes.
Say example, you have interface to send a data. It can be implemented by sending email, sending SMS, for which we can write their own implementations.
Mhm.
Now suppose that there's a requirement of orthogonal class where we need to send data using a separate service. Up till now, suppose say we were using one service, say web service. But now a third
What
party
is
library, orthogonal class, which I said, that is means you can say a different dimension, which is a dimension not relevant to ours. Like suppose sending data, that is one dimension we can say, but the service which we are using to send the data, that may be a different dimension. That means a separate concerns. Analogous to real life definition, you can say that TV and remote. TV is one implementation and remote is a separate kind of thing. Similarly, we can have switch and its electronic equipments. These are two orthogonal dimensions.
Changing only
Okay.
one thing, keeping the other thing constant, right?
Yeah, kind of. Yes, you can say that.
Okay.
So up till now, suppose we are sending the data using web service. Fine. Now suppose we in our application we have integrated with a third-party library, and we want to send the email and SMS, all those whatever the mode we had. We want to send those data with the same mode but using a different library. This means that we will have to double our implementation, which would be send email using a third-party library, and similarly a send SMS service using a third-party library. This is the problem which bridge pattern will come in picture to solve this. Means what was the problem again? The problem was like with each addition of the dimension, we will have to exponentially we will have to add classes. We will have to continuously extend classes using the inheritance in the inheritance way. Like suppose now a separate mode of sending data arises. Like say earlier we were having email and SMS. Now suppose say postal service, something out of that. Not saying that.
Or call.
Yeah. So exponentially we will have to implement it both for the web service and the
Yes.
third-party library. We will both after that. So this is the problem which arises in the inheritance, that for every dimension we will have to extend it. Actually, the problem here is like the compile time binding of the base class, which is the sending data, which is with their actual implementation. First of all, let's reiterate what is the standard definition given by the Gang of Fours. Here they are saying decouple an abstraction from its implementation so that the two can vary independently. Means what they're trying to do is separate the abstraction and the implementation part in their own hierarchy. In simple terms, instead of following usual inheritance, we will create a separate class of abstraction and separate for inheritance, which will have their own implementations. Again, in terms of previous example of mode of sending data using different service, the bridge design pattern proposes refactoring this exponentially explosive inheritance hierarchy into two orthogonal hierarchies. Separate out the two hierarchies. One for service independent abstraction and other for service dependent implementations. So what we are trying to do here, like we will create, as shown here in the class diagram here, what we will do, we will create a hierarchy, inheritance hierarchy for abstraction itself, and a separate hierarchy where the actual implementation is happening. They will have their own hierarchy. So at the runtime, what we can do, we can bind which abstraction will be working with which implementation way. So means at runtime we can decide send SMS. We want to send SMS using web service or third-party API. We are dynamically binding our implementer to abstraction here. And finally, from the function, what will the function do? Function will do nothing but it will be calling the implementation method of the IMPL which it is composed of. So what we have done here, we have separated out one dimension, separated out the other dimension. Separated out this dimension, we will deal with sending data, and this dimension we will deal with which web service we want to use. So at runtime, we can define send SMS using web service, send SMS using say third-party library. Okay, so what is the solution here is we will separate out, we will create a bridge here. This is the bridge which from which the name comes, abstraction or implementation. Abstraction inside will compose of the IMPL property, which is the implementer interface.
Object, yeah, interface.
So at runtime, we can define which implementer it wants to use. Let's try to go into the code to see how it is working. I think that would be much more beneficial for you to understand. Let me add a project here. Okay, so I'll be creating a structural bridge. Create. So this is our another console application, you can see. So in this console application, let me try to implement what is happening here. First of all, let's try to understand what was the problem. Okay, in fact, that would be much more beneficial. Let me create interface web service. So this is our interface, and I will implement class email service using iWeb service. I'll implement the interface. I'll just print out a line, console.writeLine. This will be our implementation of the email service. SMS service sending SMS. Okay. So this is a simple inheritance scenario where we are doing this. Now suppose another third party, as said, a third party library comes, then we will have to create a separate interface, iInterface, third party library, which will have its own void send, and we will be duplicating this class with just the implementation strategy will change, right? Yeah. There we will write sending SMS using third party, sending email using third party. So you see, we are binding the compile time. We are binding our abstraction with the compile time. Let's try to understand let's try to refactor it according to the bridge design pattern. Okay. According to this pattern, we need two base classes or interface, which will be our pillars of the bridge, one for abstraction and the other for implementation. This is what I'm creating here first. Okay, so we have created the two separate base classes, which our abstraction will be extending this, our implementation will be extending these. As a next step, let's create our concrete abstractions, which will be send email and send SMS, which are dealing with the modes by which we will send data. Internally, they will be calling the actual implementation, which is impl.send, with the mode as a param. and our implementation will be actually implementing this iBridge IMPL. So let's do the actual implementation of this iBridge IMPL. Class is web service iBridge IMPL, and inside this I will be writing console.writeLine class third party service IMPL and similarly it will be sending mode using third party service. So you see, we have separated out the concerns here. We have separated our one concern for email in a separate classes, and our concern for the with service to use in the separate classes. So suppose any future implementation may come, suppose a future deployment implementation come, we just need to bind this IMPL separately, and and similarly it will follow the same protocol. Let's just try it out in our client library to have it, to see what is actually, how it is behaving properly. Which abstraction service. So at runtime, I'm deciding which email I want to send. I can decide, and at runtime I can decide service dot. At runtime I can decide which service I want to use. So I can use third-party service, or I can use web service. And finally, to actually send the data, I will use service dot send data hello world. Let's just try to run this application to see if any issue is there with or not. You can see the same output. We are sending email using web service hello world, and this all we can decide at the runtime which we want to use without any consideration for the previous separate dimension or not. We can add our own service here. We can add our own separate service here, or we can create our own different kind of abstraction of sending data. So this is what I was talking about. So this is a bridge pattern here in a very simplified way. Okay, so yeah, that's it. Thanks.